Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stormkeep. Today we are going to talk about Stormdrake Guard, and I am David, and I am joined by.
Hey guys, it's Paul.
James here.
Why are we talking about Stormdrake Guard today, David? Why not, 3 months ago when we said they were A tier and then we knocked them down to B tier? Why did we downrank a unit in our tier list and then decide to make a video about it?
I think we've seen in practice at a high skill level of the power of the Stormdrake Guard with Beacon. So, being able to recycle dragons as we were kind of theory crafting has been proven to be worked in multiple different tournaments, especially at Worlds. And I think Worlds is probably where we started to see the biggest attention.
Yeah, some guy named Leo, I don't know, maybe you guys know him. He took dragons to Worlds and he went 7-1. He actually ended up winning 5 or 6 games in a row with dragons, which is very impressive. And I know that over here we were saying that they were a good unit, but it seemed like the rest of the community hadn't quite caught up yet, and it took that crazy guy Leo going 7-1 at Worlds to really kickstart the conversation about them, and now people are just talking about them en masse. So I thought we could make a video about it, because I've liked them for a while. I think they're a very interesting unit. I actually like them more now than I did in 3rd edition, because in 3rd edition, they were kind of pretending to be an anvil unit, and now they're not. They are just not an anvil by any definition. They're all hammer. All they can do is move and charge and fight. They have no other utility. Even though they do have more health than most Stormcast units, they still have less health than, like, reinforced plague bearers. Like, it's not a lot, compared to other units, sure, but it's still not enough to be an anvil. Another reason we're talking about Stormdrakes is that the heroes that bring them have gotten a lot cheaper since we have been discussing them. Tornus and Bastion in particular keep getting point cuts with every battle scroll, and we're at the point where we have 150 point Tornus, and he can bring long strikes and Stormdrake Guard in a single list, and that becomes a very appealing prospect.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that helped the Stormdrakes, honestly, was like, for the longest time, especially at the beginning of 4th when we got our book, it was like, if you wanted to take Stormdrakes, you were either paying a 200 and something point, almost 300 point Knight Draconis, who wasn't going to do anything else really, except bring Stormdrake Guard and buff him a tiny bit, or you just spent on like a 300 plus hero. So I think Hornus is really the linchpin here, is like he lets you bring all these units that we've been asking to bring for the longest of time.
It's a shame he doesn't have any synergy with these units. He just brings them in a list, and that's his only utility. James, what do you think about Drakes? I know you've been using them recently. You just did a stint with them. When we talked about Annihilators, we showcased a list that had Stormdrakes in it as well. So what do you think about this unit?
I think it's been said before in the podcast, they're our highest output in terms of a melee hammer, and they're pretty mobile. They have some, like we're showing here on the slide, there's a lot of plus sides to them. Nice little thing that catches people off guard in particular is the bounce back from the mortals. But yeah, they're just it's always something with the opponents that they have to commit a lot of resources to actually lift them, despite what we're calling a fragile unit.
Yeah, we treat them as fragile, and we'll talk about this a bit more later in this episode, because I feel like this is a discussion we should have articulated years ago, because I feel like I saw some other channel, oh god, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, I might have to edit this out. But there's another channel who just perfectly articulated the way Stormcast play, and it's that our units are fragile because we have low health count, and because of that we have to treat everything as fragile. Even though it has 36 health, we treat it like it has like 10 health, like it's just going to get blasted off the board because we can't afford to take any losses.
Exactly. I played Dragons a little bit. Yeah, I literally treat them like I'm playing like 4 Draconic Guard, which have 20 health. Like whenever I play Stormdrakes, I'm so tight with them, their movement, their positioning, because once you take that unit takes 9 wounds, you lose a dragon.
Yep.
Yeah, you have to be very careful with them. Now, it is better than, taking 10 damage and losing half your unit, like most of our hammers, but it's still not ideal, because there's no way to bring these guys back to life unless you're playing that one battle plan. I think it's Life Roots, but nobody plays Life Roots. All right, well, let's talk about them from an internal balance standpoint first, before we get into like strategy and tactics. I like making these charts. I hope you guys like seeing them. I never get any feedback on them. Nobody ever says, hey, great chart in the comments, but I keep making them, so I'm going to keep doing it, whether you guys like it or not. But as you can see, Stormdrake Guard compare very favorably to all of our other units. Obviously, the exception is the cost. They are way more expensive than any other unit. But they are one of the faster hammers that we have. They're 12-inch. They're the only reinforceable flying hammer that we have, the cavalry-wise anyway. Prosecutors are a whole different thing. And if you look at the max damage output and the accuracy, Stormdrake Guard are significantly ahead of every other cavalry unit. And if you crunch the numbers, which we'll show you guys soon, Stormdrake Guard on average do the most, by far. They even do more damage than Reinforced Grandhammer Annihilators, which is really impressive. They also have tons of other upsides. They can use the Lightning Echelon. They have one of the best power through for a non-centerpiece model. Like, they power through other cavalry, which is huge. When you're playing against the Stormcast Mirror and you get to power through and your opponent doesn't, that's a huge deal, like, strategically. Being
able to beacon power through is amazing too.
Yeah, being able to power through into range of the beacon is just tremendous. I love that. The cost is significant, but hopefully we make an argument in this video for why you should consider that the cost is worthwhile and also not as big a deal as it seems. One thing that goes underappreciated about the Stormdrake Guard is that their shooting is decent. It's like having a unit of 3 long strikes on the table with all-out attack active all the time, because they're on 2s, 3s, Rend 2, and there's 16 max in a reinforced unit. So that is pretty good. It's not the worst covering fire. Like, in a pinch, you'll be on 3s, Rend 2, potentially doing 16 damage. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's actually more damage than, like, Vanguard Paladors in a single, volley will do, and people are rightly scared of Vanguard Paladors. Yeah, that's not the main show. Obviously, you're here for the melee damage. You're looking for that juicy 32 max on the mounts and 26 on the riders. You give this unit all-out attack, and all of a sudden everything is potentially on Rend 2 because you've got anti-infantry going with the lances. Yeah, oh boy, it feels good to have Rend 2 natively on a hammer unit. After playing with a lot of Prosecutors and, like, Stormstrike and with Vanguard Paladors with Javelins, you really start to feel that Rend 1 when you face certain armies. If you don't have a way to shut off all-out defense, especially, like Kragnos or Concussors or Tempestors or something like that, you really start to feel that Rend 1. And then when you switch to Rend 2 and you start cutting through these armies like butter, oh baby, it feels good. Native Rend 2 is also really big because they keep adding more and more armies that can ignore weapon abilities. So if you have something like Crit Mortals or Anti-Infantry or something like that, none of that's going to work against Khorne. It's not going to work against Nurgle. So you need native Rend 2 attackers. Units like Karazai, Stormdrake Guard, most of the damage from Dracoths would be Rend 2. Stuff like that is really important to think about when you build a list these days.
I also do like the fact that the Rend 2 shooting from dragons could also sometimes complement the shooting from, like, if you're running long strikes, for example. Sometimes when you shoot long strikes at, like, a juicy target, like a monster, sometimes a monster's left with, like, 1 or 2 wounds. If you have Stormdrake Guard nearby that shoot 10 inches, like, you can kind of finish it off.
Yeah, and having Rend 2 shooting, people may not use all-out defense. Like, if they're on a 4-up save, they'd be like, I'm on 6s, whatever. I'll just let it go through. If it's Rend 1, they'll be, on 5s, okay, I can go back to 4s. Yeah, I'll use all-out defense for that. But, like, the psychological effect of having Rend 2 shooting plays a big part. All right, let's look at the numbers. Average damage output. As you can see, no cost considered. This is just, when you throw this unit, it gets everything on its profile in a single turn. This includes charge mortal wounds. This includes Draconic Onslaught mortal wounds from the Rampage. It includes shooting. When you consider all of that put together, you can see Stormdrake Guard are, without a doubt, the single best hammer unit that we have. They're not vastly ahead of Concussors and Fulminators, but those units have their own downsides, and there's reasons to use the Stormdrake Guard instead. And we can see it per point. Well, that's where this whole discussion falls apart. Stormdrake Guard are not our most inefficient unit. I think that belongs to Palador Axis. Those guys are just, oh man, they need a point cut. 500 is way too much for them. But Stormdrake Guard are still holding there respectably. It's like having, per point, a Karazai with a +2 attack bonus, which is pretty good. And that leads us to a discussion I've really been wanting to have on the channel for a while. This is an important concept that I haven't figured out how to articulate, and I hope in this video I can do it. So one thing that we talked about a long, long time ago is that efficiency and impact are two sides of the same coin when it comes to discussing a unit. You need both. Efficiency is important, but the impact of the unit is also important. So if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to go off on a little rant here. Despite having a 3+ save, Stormcast for their cost, actually have really low health density. We have low model count, which usually means we have low health density, right? If you consider Stormcast compared to the most obvious example would be something like Slaves to Darkness, where they just get, 66% more models. Something like Chaos Chosen compared to Grandhammer Annihilators, they just get more models than we get, right? And they pay for it as well, but they don't pay for it proportionally, right? Like they get more models per point than we get, and they have the same defensive profile, 3-up saves, 5-up wards, and they have more or less the same offensive profile as well. They just get more models. And that's because Stormcast obviously have teleports and shooting and reserves and Heaven Sent and all these other tools. So if we had the same profile as another army, we'd be impossible to balance, right? We have to be inefficient. That's just the nature of our rules because of our model range. And Stormcast have to deal good damage, but because we have lower model count, once we start taking damage, the damage that we do drops off drastically. So for example, we lose, after taking about 10 damage, most of our hammer units lose somewhere between 1/3 to 50% of their damage output. Whereas if you look at a unit like Chaos Chosen, they only drop by about 30% after taking 10 damage, and they can rally back pretty well because they have a banner as well. And once we take this damage, we probably won't have enough damage left to destroy enemy units, which is really bad for us. So it creates like a snowball effect. Once you lose half a unit, your unit's suddenly not strong enough to destroy the rest of the enemy unit, and you'll just take further losses. And this is compounded by the fact that once we take that damage, it's very difficult to recover it, because we can only return one unit with Heaven Sent. That's a once per game ability on one unit, and none of our units use Rally particularly well. Most of our hammer units being 3 to 5 health. We don't have any rally bonuses anymore since they put the Knight Heraldor into Legends. There's, once we lose a Palador or a Dracoth, it's probably dead for the rest of the game. Sometimes we'll have spare command points and we'll go fishing and hope that we roll and get it back, but we're not relying on that. Like once a model dies for us, it's gone. Another thing to consider with this, so keep all that in mind so far. We're fragile, we don't take damage well, and we need to avoid taking damage so that we can actually do the damage. And then when you think about how combat activations work, Stormcast usually only want to fight with one unit at a time. Because if we fight with 2 units, if we have 2 units in combat, we will fight with 1 unit, and then the opponent will have a chance to attack our other unit that's in combat. And because we don't take hits very well, that's really bad for us. So ideally, we want to be fighting with 1 unit at a time. That way, we can either wipe the opponent out or cripple them to the point where they can't hurt us back significantly. So that's a big reason why we use a lot of shooting units in our army. That's why a lot of our units have shooting built into them as well as combat, because we need to soften targets up and then finish them off in combat. So when you consider all of this, this is why we always say Stormcast are a fragile army. Everything we do, even if our units are 40 health with a 3-up save and -1 hit and a 5-up ward, we still have to treat it as fragile. Because once we take that damage, there's no coming back from it. If you don't treat the unit with precision, if you just throw it into the enemy army and expect it to survive all of the attacks, it's probably an expensive unit, and we're not going to get any of those models back. And once we start taking losses, they compound, and it's like a snowball effect that loses the game. And Stormcast, therefore, don't trade like most armies want to trade. Some armies will send a 100-point unit in to hold a 400-point unit in place, and then they'll come in with their own 300-point unit to kill that 400-point unit. So you've effectively traded up in that respect. Stormcast don't really do this. Because our hammer units are so fragile and expensive and low model count, we either use screens, right? And we hold them in place and then we kill them, or we use our mobility tools in order to get the right targets at the right time. Stormcast want to be hitting first, and we want to be hitting the enemy at full strength so that we can fully wipe them out with taking no losses. And when you do it properly, Stormcast feels like an insanely overpowered army. So we have to be purposeful, we have to be decisive. There's no way back from losses, there's no way back from taking half measures and then losing a unit. And if we can't wipe out enemy units, we will take losses. So it's better to overkill than underkill. That's my thesis here. So for this reason, when you consider all these things, Stormdrake Guard costing 620 points doesn't feel that bad because they get the job done. They do a lot of damage. They do the most damage out of anything else in our army. They have flying to get to places where other units wouldn't be able to get to. They have an excellent rampage, one of the best in the game, especially on the unit that it's on, with the base size and the cohesion that we have. This is an excellent unit, but it has to be used very carefully. And when you do use it very carefully, you don't feel the cost as much because the rest of your list will account for it. Now, of course, there's some exceptions to everything I've said. Karazai is one of the units that doesn't get weaker as he takes damage. In fact, he gets stronger when he takes damage, and that's actually one of his benefits. And Questor Soulsworn break all these rules because they are the most efficient unit in our entire book. In terms of health, damage, model count, they just do everything the best per point. However, they have a lot of issues of their own. Karazai and Questors are not perfect units, and although we are seeing a lot of Questor spam lately, I think that's just a symptom of other units not being efficient enough rather than Questors being like this godly unit that's carrying the whole army.
I definitely agree. Honestly, that's probably one of the biggest things you'll see the difference between Stormcast players' level of skill is a lot of new players get Stormcast models, and they look like these models that are supposed to like be like gods amongst men, and they're supposed to sit there and do a lot of damage, and it's supposed to live and live and live. And as you keep playing and playing and playing, you realize like it's almost I almost treat these models like I'm playing Cruel Boys, right? Like I don't look at my 3-up save. It's nice, it really is nice, but I treat my 3-up save as if it's a 6-up save because I'd rather just not be hit at all. And that's something that comes over time, and Stormdrake Guard especially really tests your ability of how good are you at keeping your models alive. Because every Stormdrake list is, I cannot lose my Stormdrakes until my opponent's army's back is essentially broken.
Yeah, or you put them in a position where, in order to kill your Stormdrakes, they are crippling themselves. They're overextending massively, and you're going to run away with the game because of it.
Exactly.
A couple of things I'll add here, and this is kind of just a rule of thumb in general for the game, is you kind of reach this point where you can look at impact versus efficiency as sort of like a supply and demand curve. If you're going to be spamming efficient units, you're going to be in a situation where the list doesn't have much impact. But if you're going to be have a lot of high impact units, the list isn't going to be efficient, so to speak. I don't know if that's necessarily a supply and demand curve or just like a inverse proportionality or something like that. Just to break out the math and engineering terms there. Other than that, most of what I've seen on the slide, I do agree with. There are some exceptions, obviously. When Paul's mentioned that we want to fight with one unit at a time, I do, in 90% of scenarios, agree with that. Obviously, there's extenuating circumstances, like if you have fight first set up or anywhere, or double activations, or if you can sort of leverage your opponent into choosing another fight that they won't benefit much off of. Say you fight with a unit of Prosecutors, they do their damage, and with the Prosecutors somewhere, Shield Annihilators charged in somehow. Your opponent's not really going to want to fight the Prosecutors, they're going to want to go into the Annihilators, and with the 2-up save, there's not much that they'll probably be able to do at that point. That's just a little bit of a hypothetical there, but...
Yeah, we want to try to manufacture scenarios to get around this weakness. And that's why Annihilators are such an interesting unit, because with Finest Hour and All-Out Defense, they're effectively 2+ ignoring Ren 2. They can tank almost anything in the game. So being able to throw them into that situation, tie down an enemy unit, that's a cool thing that they do. But that's only cool because the rest of our army doesn't do that.
Exactly.
And Finest Hour does help with this, right? Like, you mentioned Prosecutors, and they're a really good example because you used double Prosecutors for a long time, but how often did you find yourself charging into combat with both units of Prosecutors? Or was it like one at a time usually, right?
In my list that ended up pivoting to, I'm just using one around type deal.
Yeah, because you really start to feel that lack of health when you start bringing... that's the... Prosecutors, I think, are an excellent unit in terms of design because they have very good strengths and very good weaknesses. Like big strengths, big weaknesses. And you really start to feel it when you start bringing too many of them.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying, where you have this sort of like, you're bringing the sufficient unit, or you're bringing a high impact unit, your list won't necessarily be too efficient at the end of the day. So if you reach that point where we're running 3 to 4 units of Prosecutors, you got some high impact units, but the list is sort of denaturing when we're talking about the efficiency conversation.
Yeah,
so there's better considerations for the list at that point.
Yeah, that's why lists with Ionis, Karazai, Kragnos, and Celestin Prime, like people love these Hero Hammer lists but they don't work because none of those units have the efficiency to make that list a viable choice, because you're going to take too many, like your list takes huge losses when you lose one of those models. But if you bring a more well-rounded list with, say, Karazai, a couple units of Questor Soulsworn, well, once you lose Karazai, you've still got multiple units on the table that can do stuff.
Yep.
And that's why we see Questor Soulsworn in almost every list, because they plug that efficiency hole that Stormcast innately have. Questors are the one exception to a fundamental problem with the army. All right, so we've talked enough about that. Let's talk about why we actually like Stormdrake Guard and why we're excited about them. And one of the big reasons for me is this ability, Draconic Onslaught, because you don't have to end in combat when you use this ability. So you can charge, use Draconic Onslaught to move out of combat range, and then you can still pile in and fight later because you charge that turn, the unit's eligible to be picked. So what you can do is you can set up scenarios where you charge with multiple units, the Stormdrakes stay out of combat, because they don't have to be in combat, but they can still fight later. You fight with one unit, and then your opponent, it's their turn, they fight the unit that you fought with, no big deal. And then you fight with the Stormdrakes before they have a chance to take damage. This is effectively a way to get 2 units to fight reliably before your opponent can activate. And now it is random, obviously, with the 3+, you never want to rely on a single 3+ roll if you can help it. Like you don't build your strategy around 3+ rolls. That's why we don't use the Knight Azuros, because his abilities are very strong, very impactful, but they're also totally random and they will screw you at an important time. However, Stormdrake Guard can also get the Lightning Echelon battle formation ability and get Strike First on a 3-up as well. So if the Draconic Onslaught fails, well, at least you can still get a 3+ Lightning Echelon and Strike First, effectively doing the same thing you would do, fight with 2 units before your opponent can pick one. So that's why I consider Lightning Echelon to be like a must-have when you use Stormdrake Guard, because maybe that's just me and my way of playing. I hate relying on a single 3+ dice roll. I don't know if anyone loves that type of gameplay. I personally just despise it. So I always try to have like some kind of insurance, some kind of backup in case the first one goes wrong.
Yeah, if you play dragons, sometimes with that 3+, and when you get that good 2d6, you could get these Stormdrakes real deep into enemy stuff. So like we are seeing a lot of lists in the meta, for example, like we use daughters, right? So like daughters kind of want a death ball a little bit with their witches, and then like the shrines and the Queen Crow.
Oh, Kragnos.
Yeah. So like those units have to be near the foot witches to get all the buffs and do everything, right? So if you can get a lucky roll, you might have 1 or 2 dragons that could reach those far 3 inches and touch her, and then the units could potentially die, and that's a big swing, maybe for your tactics, maybe for what they were going to plan to do. So I have learned that it does make your opponent, if they've played against dragons, play a little differently, because they have to assume then you might roll a 3+ and you might roll a good charge roll that they might hit in the back, right? Like if you're playing Seraphon too, if you were able to roll big enough to get over their lines and you kill the Slan, like that's massive.
Yeah, I assumed, a really low roll in the 2d6 so that you can just get out of combat. If that's the minimum that you do with the ability, that's a good ability already. But you're talking about like, oh, well, what if you roll average or good, and then, oh yeah, this unit can really pop off. It can get to some places that your opponent is not expecting at all. There's a lot of times where you can fly over with one model and then keep 2-inch cohesion through an enemy unit because you get that 2-inch cohesion, which is such an awesome ability. And you can just get to places nobody's expecting, and it's really, really good. And then after using the Draconic Onslaught, you can try to get Strike First, and then, yeah, it just gets fun from there. Just roll 3 ups.
Charge into terrain.
Yeah.
I was going to say that you can make some sort of like Gardas' wager as like an analogy to Pascal's wager with these 2 abilities. You have Lightning Echelon go off and Draconic Onslaught go off in the same one. You're in a happy situation. You have either, if Lightning Echelon or Draconic Onslaught go off in 2 slots, you're in a good situation. And then just the 1 in 4 chance that neither of them go off. So, yeah, strong abilities. And they set you up for success pretty well.
Let's take a look at a practical example. This was a game that I played where Kragnos was stuck in combat fighting some Questor Soulsworn and Tempestors off on the left side. Now, the Stormdrake Guard, I knew that I could weaken Kragnos, and there was a possibility that I could kill him with shooting and things like that. But I didn't know, how well that was going to go. So I wanted to hedge my bets, because if I could kill Kragnos with shooting and fighting with the Questers, for example, then I wanted to have my Stormdrakes charge into the unit of Squigs you see in the top middle. But just getting a normal charge, it would be too far for my Stormdrakes to do that. So what I did was I moved my Stormdrake Guard towards Kragnos and ended up finishing a charge with one model within half an inch of Kragnos, and then another model as close to the Squigs as possible. Then, once the combat phase started, I activated Draconic Onslaught, moved out of combat with Kragnos, because I did end up doing enough damage to him and shooting and combat, and charges and all that stuff. And I ended up moving towards the Squigs, staying out of combat with them. And then, once the Stormdrake Guard had a chance, they piled in, fought, and wiped out all the Squigs. This is the kind of maneuver you can't do with another Stormcast unit. This is something only Stormdrake Guard can do. And I really like it because one of the problems with playing Stormcast, when you have to play a combined arms army of shooting and combat, is knowing how much to dedicate when and where. That's a hard thing to try to predict because dice be dice, right? And having that kind of ability to bounce from one combat into another, this effectively gave me a whole turn extra of fighting those Squigs before they had a chance to hit me. Because if I had just charged into Kragnos and finished him off, the Squigs probably would have charged me and I would have taken losses. We get questions about the Stormdrake Guard all the time on the server. Here's the 4 most common questions, so I thought we could have a little chat about them. First question that we get all the time, are non-reinforced Stormdrake Guard viable? Now, this might just be my opinion, but I think no. I think they are not viable. I think the amount of impact that only 2 Stormdrake Guard have is not good enough, and the inefficiency really starts to feel it, because you could have 6 Prosecutors instead of 2 Stormdrakes. But you can't have a double, triple, quadruple reinforced unit of Prosecutors instead of reinforced Stormdrakes. So I think the only way to play Stormdrakes is to have them reinforced. But what do you guys think about that?
I agree. I think if you're going to spend the price on Stormdrakes, you just have to go all in. Like Stormdrakes, you have to look at them as a unit as you would a Karazai or a Krondi or any other big expensive piece that my list is going to build around this. So if you want Stormdrakes, 4 definitely the way to go.
Yeah, the way I looked at Stormdrakes when I started using them in some stress testing recently, going between list archetypes, was that they were pretty much replacing 12 Prosecutors for me. So I don't necessarily see 6 Prosecutors and 2 Stormdrakes being as equivalents there.
Yeah, it's kind of like comparing 6 Prosecutors to Andrasta. 6 Prosecutors is just better, right?
Yeah, and I learned that lesson early on in the index.
Okay, next question. Lances or swords? What do you guys think?
I like lances. Yeah. I know Khorne, the weapon ability thing could be significant. I feel like there's too many other matchups that I would still just want the lances. If there's if I draw that one person in a GT, I guess on my lance damage is halved. But I think I still rather just go to lances.
So the argument for swords, besides, Khorne and Nurgle, which I think that is a very good argument, right? If you face a lot of Khorne and Nurgle, I would probably use swords instead. But the other argument would be, well, what if you're fighting during the enemy turn when you haven't charged, right? Because the swords would have 6 attacks, the lances would have 3 attacks. It just seems like the swords are significantly better. But the thing is, with Stormdrake Guard, is you really shouldn't be fighting off the charge with them. You should be charging into the enemy, using power through and or Beacon of Azir with translocation in order to recycle the unit and teleport away back to safety, and then doing it all again. Because remember, you have to treat this unit as a precious, fragile little egg that is just going to crack as soon as it takes any kind of damage. So you have to avoid taking as much damage as possible. And when you play it that way, Stormdrake Guard end up charging 2-3 times, and then they finally get stuck in combat. And for all those situations where you want anti-infantry, you will be very glad that you picked the lances instead. Also, the lances look cooler. I think that's a big reason to use the lances. One matchup in particular that stands out to me when I use the lances is trolls. Oh man, I hate fighting trolls with swords. It is just awful. You really feel it against that high health pool.
Or Kroxigors.
And Kroxigors, yeah, that's another one. God, I hate Kroxigors. And they're everywhere, and they keep coming back to life.
Don't feed the trolls, man.
Now, I have been thinking lately, because we've got Annihilators on the brain as well, maybe it'll be cool to pair Annihilators with swords, because, the swords do full damage all the time. They don't need to charge, so maybe Annihilators giving an enemy strike last could work. But the problem I have with that is that kind of leans into Thunderhead Host, and if you're doing Thunderhead Host, you're not taking Lightning Echelon, which segues perfectly into the next question. How necessary is Lightning Echelon when using Stormdrake Guard? I think it's like you should 100% is my opinion. You should 100% every time Stormdrake Guard are on your list, you should have Lightning Echelon, because the reason you're using Stormdrake Guard is to do this double fight thing. You're trying to get as much value out of this unit. You picked this unit, and this is one of the most important things that it does. And if you don't bring the Lightning Echelon, you're probably not going to do that thing reliably. So I think it's extremely important to get Lightning Echelon. Also, it gives you the utility of having a game-ending countercharge. If your opponent lets you countercharge into a 3+ strike first, sometimes that just wins the game for you. And that, like 1 in 20 games might be won with that. But that might be the one game that's the finals in the tournament. So I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I've just found this also really hard to get max value out of Thunderhead Host with the Stormdrake list. I just rather have Lightning Echelon. And also, sometimes you run into some stuff like counter spells where, like, you're given strike last, or an enemy will have strike first, and you're like, it kind of throws your opponent off, or like on a 3+, I could just negate that essentially. So, like, it's another aspect. If you're spending all these points on Stormdrake Guard, you might as well beef them up as much as possible.
Yeah,
and let your rest of your list just flow into it.
What do you think, James? Would you skip Lightning Echelon ever?
The only situation I would is if you don't have if you're leaning on Thunderhead Host in a defensive position, and you're not necessarily having an Everhammer charge in with them, or planning to have an Everhammer charge in with the Stormdrakes. Like, if you're really sticking to that, keep it one fight at a time mentality.
Yeah, in that case, shouldn't you just use another unit, though? Like Concussors, or something like Vanguard Paladors with Javelins, or Karazai?
We can have a talk about that later, yeah.
Yeah, so for that reason, I don't usually like pairing Stormdrake Guard with units that need a battle formation. Something like Reclusians. If you don't have Sentinels of the Bleak Citadels to give them a 5-up board, Reclusians aren't good. So if you have both Reclusians and Stormdrakes in a list, one of those units is suboptimal, and we can't afford to be suboptimal right now.
Stormdrake Guard are what you're building the list around, and what you're feeding the subfaction for, just like Reclusians or Prosecutors would be.
Yeah, now I might skip Lightning Echelon if I was using Concussors, right? I might do that, or Tempestors, just because I have a different Extremis unit. But with Stormdrake Guard, every time, 100%, you need Lightning Echelon.
Yep.
And another question we get all the time, how do you deal with the models bumping into each other? You guys may have seen in the screenshots previously in this video, I actually bring all 4 models, and then I just replace 2 of them with blank bases, because I don't want to ruin my models, and I don't think my opponent wants me to ruin my models. I don't think the TO wants me to ruin my models, just for the game to play well. So I think this is an issue. I know they have 2-inch cohesion, but there's a lot of situations where you want as tight formation as possible. So I always ask ahead of time, I just don't want to wreck my models. That's what I do. Hopefully it works for you too.
I also have magnets on mine, so like I have the base magnetized to the poles, and the poles magnetized to the model, so I just take off the models as I need to. But yeah, please don't break your models. Stormdrake are not cheap. Nothing in this hobby is cheap.
Those little fangs or whatever on the end of their wings, those break all the time. It drives me nuts.
Mm-hmm. I actually had one break off its light stand recently.
Oh, was it sheared?
Yeah, sheared at the ball.
Whoa, that's weird.
It was an odd one.
You fix that?
I don't know. I'll have to figure it out.
All right, well, let's go through a practical example of Stormdrake Guard, and this is the same game that I played before, so they're a bit of a spoiler, where Kragnos ends up. But let's talk about thought process and what the Stormdrake Guard can offer you in a scenario like this that another unit wouldn't be able to offer you. So here is the situation. The Stormcast player has more regiments than the Gitz player, so they don't control first turn priority. So you're in a situation where the opponent can go first, teleport Kragnos into a 3d6 charge, and end the game. Because if Kragnos gets into the Stormdrakes, you're too far behind at that point, the game is over. You're not going to win this one. However, because I have Beacon of Azir, if the opponent chooses to go first, they teleport Kragnos, I instantly beacon away the Stormdrakes to safety. Kragnos is stuck there, probably not charging anything, but if he does charge, it's going to be Questor Soulsworn in cover. And then I'm threatening a double turn. So knowing this, I'm fairly confident my opponent will make me go first. So I also try to position my Stormdrakes more or less in the center of the board. That way I can pivot one way or the other. If I want to be aggressive, I have that option. Also, if I'm forced to go first, because I have more regiments, I'll also have the reroll on priority. So the enemy double turn is very unlikely. I'll have a 75% chance of winning that roll off, but that's still possible. You know, like 1 in 4 chance of losing the game. I'm not going to take that risk. So I'm forced to go first. I do a few things on my turn. I decide not to actually be aggressive with the Stormdrake Guard, even though I did deploy them in the middle. I kind of did this to try to force him to go first. I wanted him to take the bait so that I could translocate away, and when the bait doesn't work, well, that's okay. I can just move normally 12 inches over to the right side. I summoned a Pendulum on the left side so that it could move in the enemy turn and block Kragnos' charge lane in case the teleport failed. You know, he got some long bomb charge into the Questors from the left side. I still had a Pendulum threatening to move into combat with him and blocking his charge. The Tempestors were dropped in on the right side because I thought I could kill the Bounders in a single round of shooting. Unfortunately, they survived with one model who would rally back throughout the entire game. If I had dropped another Knight Relictor, I definitely would have finished them off. But the Knight Judicator. If I had dropped a Knight Judicator, I would have finished off the Bounders. The Relictor actually used the portal to get in range to translocate the Tempestors, and he banked some ritual points because I didn't want to have to be forced to use Beacon. I wanted to save Beacon of Azir in case, like, my opponent gets a double turn, he teleports Kragnos into range, and I have the Beacon as just in case he gets a double turn. I wanted to save it. And then on my opponent's turn, it's exactly what I thought would happen. Kragnos was teleported forward, and the Stormdrake Guard actually just got a big redeploy. I didn't have to use Beacon this turn. I'm going to save that in case he gets a double turn. I did use Magical Intervention to save my Tempestors, and I actually put them in cover behind the Questor Soulsworn so that I could keep Kragnos in combat. Because if my opponent doesn't win a double turn, and again, I'll have a 75% chance of winning the Prior roll, if Kragnos is stuck in combat, my Stormdrake Guard can walk over and finish him off very easily. I just want to stop Kragnos from charging at all costs. That is how I thought I would win this game. Kragnos, of course, charged in, along with a unit of 10 Bounders. However, the -1 hit from cover made Kragnos whiff pretty hard. He didn't kill the Knight Arcanum. He only killed one Tempestor, and he killed no Questor Soulsworn. He missed all those attacks. So that was another reason to put so many units in here, because if he splits his attacks, he ends up doing very little. The Bounders were actually wiped out before they had a chance to attack, because the Questor Soulsworn are an efficient damaging unit. Their only problem is their speed. And from this position, even if my opponent got a double turn, all he can do is keep fighting the units that are in cover. There's nothing else that can threaten my Stormdrakes. So whether he gets a double turn or not, I feel like this game is in the bag. But maybe it didn't go so smoothly. Well, you saw the next turn earlier in the video, so if you're curious, you can check out the full battle report. I wrote it up a while ago for the Discord server. You can go check it out in the battle report section. It's called Stormdrakes versus Kragnos on Cyclic Shifts. Let's talk Stormdrake lists. So we kind of touched on this earlier when we said that they're a build-around unit, and I really do feel that. The whole list, your list idea starts with, I'm putting Stormdrake Guard in my list, and a lot of it starts to kind of build around that. So the first thing that happens once you put Stormdrake Guard is you have a Knight Relictor with Beacon of Azir. The Knight Relictor reduces wards, which is fantastic. He's also a priest who can chant Translocate, and he can use the Beacon of Azir to guarantee the Translocate once per game. And this is crucial. You never want to rely on a 2+ dice roll to save your Stormdrake Guard. You need a guaranteed with Beacon of Azir. And I think that's, like, every time you use Stormdrake Guard, you need that. Now you also need a hero to bring the Stormdrake Guard, and there's a lot of choices here. You can do Tornus, he's the cheapest, but then he doesn't really have any other use besides sometimes giving -1 hit and being reasonably fast. You can go with a Lord Solicit on Dracoth, who can also bring other extremist units, so you can splash in some Tempestors or Concussors or something like that. You could bring Bastion. I'm actually a big fan of Bastion with Stormdrakes because Stormdrakes want +1 hit all the time from all-out attacks specifically. They can't really benefit from Vigilors. So Bastion is a natural fit for them, but he has issues staying in their range, so it's not the best fit. What hero do you guys usually use to bring your Stormdrake Guard?
Or Bastion for me, yeah. And I pivoted towards Bastion.
Yeah, Tornus or Bastion for sure. I think usually I've been using Tornus though, but I do like Bastion. Bastion's gotten cheap enough where he's an easy slot in a lot of times in a Drake list.
Yeah, another one worth considering is Vandus, because he does give a fight with me with +1 hit to a Warrior Chamber unit, which is kind of interesting. And bonus control, which could matter maybe someday.
Chances are, if you're bringing a Warrior Chamber unit, you're going to be bringing Questers, and they're an efficient because they're an efficient unit. And funny enough, that would stack with their control score modifier too.
Yeah, you could be control 12 with Questers.
Ooh, spooky.
And they can be +1 hit without Thunderhead Host. That's actually not bad, right?
Yeah.
Now, he has 20 points more than Tornus for some reason I don't understand. Probably because the model's getting retired soon and they forgot about him.
It's because he's got a cool backstory.
Sure. What about like the big dragons? What about Karazai and Krondas? Would you guys ever run those together with Reinforced Stormdrake Guard?
No, I think it's just too many points in two units at that point.
Yeah, we're getting into that conversation of we're bringing in a lot of high impact units, and every time we lose one of those units, it's a significant loss of our army at that rate.
Yeah. What about someone cheaper, maybe like Ionis?
It doesn't synergize well at that point.
Yeah, if he could give Bless to companions as well, maybe. But I don't think you need more Rider. Like, Riders having 2, 4, 6, 8 more damage isn't going to be significant enough.
Well, what about, on that topic, what about the Knight Draconis?
I think the Draconis would actually be great if he had a better regiment option. I think what's holding back the Draconis is a regiment option. The fact that he could only bring Stormdrake Guard is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
any Screamers is an issue.
He can't even bring Warrior. Like, what is that?
Yeah, he's a weird one.
His buff is decent, though. Like, +1 attack on the best weapon on the model. That's not bad, but then it has...
It's a force multiplier, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the only buff we have for companion weapons in the whole book. It's like they realized at the very end of the book, like, oh, we can buff companion weapons, too. Let's write one in, quick, before we ship.
I mean, he himself doesn't do bad damage. Like, he's a good, just annoying piece. And he also doesn't... He still has Arcane Heritage, right? Like, he gives Stormdrake Guard Arcane Heritage, I think.
Yeah,
like the
4-up spell
ignore.
ignore. Yeah, we haven't talked about that at all, right? But I think that's probably because there's no spell damage armies in the game right now. That might change very soon, in fact. But right now, there's just... That spell ignore is just worthless.
Yeah, but the biggest thing is, they just keep lowering down his points, which is fine. But they're not changing his regiment option. And that's the problem is it's not that we don't want to take him. It's either you make him so cheap in the hundreds where it's like, okay, well, I'm just taking him now because I might as well, or you keep him in the low twos and you just let him take anything, or at least Warrior Chamber.
I really think Lord Vigilant on Morgriff is better than the Knight Draconis now.
I can believe it.
Okay,
Yeah, I agree with that.
What a world to live in. A literal blank war scroll is better than a buffing piece.
Yeah, because you can bring more.
He brings good units, it's true, yeah. But what else could the Knight Draconis bring? He can't bring Vanguard or Ruination. Even if he brought Warrior, that wouldn't matter because Warrior's the easiest thing to bring. That model's cooked. And it needs to go down 50 points.
Yeah, if it's only going to be bring Extremist Chamber, it needs to be dumb cheap.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this list. This is Drake and Judy. We actually featured this one on Stormkeep number 85 when we talked about lists this season. And I haven't really touched this list in a while. This was also before we abandoned Wizards as a concept. We're just getting leaner and leaner and just bringing more hammer units and screens, and Wizards actually, surprisingly, didn't make the cut in a lot of our new lists. But this list I really liked playing because you've got that Brick of Stormdrake Guard, you've got the Quester Soulsworn as a mid-hammer kind of thing, and then you've still got Tempester, so you can have -1 ward and no all-out defense on an enemy that the Stormdrake Guard are attacking. And that feels really good to pump up your damage that high. You'll kill most things in the game. And the extra, like, negating all that defense and reducing boards is really useful when your opponent starts throwing -1 hit effects at you. So if you're playing against Nurgle or Lumineth or things that have lots of -1 hit debuffs, Stormdrake Guard really suffer into -1 hit. And there, unfortunately, isn't really a way around it. So you just got to stack on more offense. So being able to disable all that defense feels really good. I also quite like the Tempesters here because they're a good unit to bring back with Heaven Sent. So I play them a little more aggressively than I would other armies or other lists that I would play, because the Tempesters sometimes, I really like them. They're such a good jack of all trades unit. They really fill the role that you need them to. And then to back up the Night Judicators, because I don't have any way to bring long strikes in this list, I brought 2 Night Judicators, which complement the Tempester damage in order to significantly cripple things or just wipe things off the board entirely. Just those 3 units. And then to balance out the damage a bit, the Knight Arcanum is going to be casting Quicksilver Swords and Aether Void Pendulum. The swords are just a nice, hitting unit. Crit mortals on 13 attacks is pretty decent. It'll catch people off guard, especially when you're reducing their wards by 1. Next list I wanted to include was one from our second list video from this season, which was called... this was from the Annihilator video. It's called, Hey, look, James isn't using Prosecutors. So you want to run us through this one, James?
Yeah, sure. And this is a bit of a case study, going back to the efficiency impact thing, and with this list. So, like I said, my mindset with this list was, I don't want to play 12 Prosecutors anymore. Let's start using dragons, and hey, Annihilators look cool. So I built a list around what I thought was Stormdrakes, but I ended up building a list that was actually built around Annihilators, or I was trying to build a list around Annihilators. The idea with the list was that you had 2 units of Annihilators to guard Vanguard Raptors, or a unit of Vanguard Raptors to drop in near a unit of Annihilators to give them Thunderhead Host, block out some charge lanes, and a Stormdrake Guard move up to pester the front lines of the opponent as needed, and then power through back to safety or get beaconed away after they power through whatever is needed. Issue with this list, as you can see, is that it's really lean. Not many units in the list, and you got 4 really high impact units, but it's not efficient. The list itself isn't efficient anyway.
Yeah, when you start seeing, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 units in a list, you're like, okay, maybe this list is just not efficient enough.
Yeah. So this list ended up seeing a couple of permutations where I took away half a unit of Annihilators, brought in Bastion to increase the efficacy of the Stormdrakes, and give myself some... give myself free +1 to hit on shooting with Bastion where needed. And then ultimately I decided it's just like, let's just forgo the Stormdrakes and let's go back to this concept of setting up some phalanxes. We're going to drop the Stormdrakes. It's going to open up some points for Karazai, open up some points for Questers, and yeah, that was the ultimate permutation I sort of sat on for a bit.
Yeah, I think this... Let me ask you this. How did you feel about Thunderhead Host and a list with Stormdrake Guard?
Again, this was the sort of situation I was talking about where I was okay with it, because at any given point, I was really just charging the Stormdrakes in with them on their own. Yeah, the Annihilators weren't necessarily charging in with them, or if they were, I was sort of in a position where I couldn't afford them to be charging.
Yeah, but because you weren't getting the most out of the Stormdrakes, I guess that's one of the reasons you started looking for alternatives and you pivoted into Karazai instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Right on. Well, we'll be talking about Karazai soon in another video, so stay tuned for that.
Yep.
I also wanted to highlight Oblivion's list from our second list building episode, episode number 87. This one fixes a core problem that I have with the Stormdrake Guard, which is that they just are not an anvil unit. Right? And what it decides to do is it goes in with a Lord Celestin on Dracoth and Quicksilver Draft to give the reinforced concussor strike first once per game. So what you can do is you can set up an anvil unit somewhere while playing a Stormdrake Guard list. And that's not something we typically do, right? Like James, we were just talking about Annihilators, creating anvils, but this I like more because it first of all, it's faster, it does more damage, and it's guaranteed strike first once per game rather than hoping for a dice roll. And it doesn't, it's got some issues though, right? Like it doesn't have Beacon of Azir, which I think is a must-have for Stormdrake Guard, which is one of the problems of how do you set up an anvil without Quicksilver Draft while also needing Beacon of Azir to recycle? That's a tough one. Yeah. I don't know how to get around that necessarily. I don't like relying on 2+ dice rolls. It also doesn't have any Vigilors. And the Vigilors here would be very good because you could see 2 Night Judicators and 2 Questor Soulsworn units. All 4 of those would really like to have +1 hit all the time. So that's some issues that need to be solved when it comes to this concept. Maybe the way to go is a Lord Terminos with Reclusians because it's a cheaper package, and then you can bring in some Vigilors on top of that. Maybe if the points work out. I don't know. I'd have to tinker with it more. But I did want to say that this feels really good when you do it, although the other inefficiencies in the list lead me to preferring something else. And I thought we could close out the video talking about Leo's WCW 2025 list, because that's what put Stormdrakes on the map for discussion purposes. So he did something unorthodox, which is doing the Stormdrake Guard with 3 units of Questor Soulsworn. I think I had a meme list with Questor Soulsworn called Questor Quest, where I brought 3 units, and I felt like, oh man, I'm really pushing my limit here. I can't bring any more than that because they're 5-inch move, they're rend 1, they don't have any charge bonuses, so they're a good pile of stats, but they can be hard to deliver if you're trying to use them as an offensive hammer. But what Leo was doing was saying, no, I'm not trying to deliver them as an offensive hammer. They're playing the flanks while Stormdrake Guard run the show. And that ends up being a really good combination. Although it does take Thunderhead Host, you're missing out on the Lightning Echelon means that there's going to be times where you don't get that Strike First utility, and that's why a lot of people who have tried this list have started pivoting into something like, instead of taking the Stormdrake Guard, they'll take Vanguard Paladors with Javelins and a unit of Vigilors. And then that way they can just still have really good high, like long-range threat projection. You don't get the native Rend 2, though, and there's other issues with that. But anyway, I'm rambling. David, this is the list that got you into Stormdrake Guard, right? It got you on the train?
Yeah, this is a list I've been testing, except just with Lightning Ecleon instead of Thunderhead Host. I just in my practice game, I mean, my brain doesn't operate like Leo's. But I found it really hard to like want to keep questers near either long strikes or my dragons. As someone who's played 12 Paladors, I just actually played 12 Paladors again this weekend. I'll probably play it until 5th edition at this point. I'm like very particular where I place my units and like long strikes and stuff, because I know I could usually only recycle 1 unit. So if I can't really put another unit in danger, I have to like kind of put them somewhat far enough that I can redeploy away if I need to. So I like this list a lot more with Lightning Ecleon than Thunderhead Host, because I like the extra protection of feeling like I could keep my Raptors a little bit further from the enemy. So both my units aren't really hit, because your only hammers here are your dragons and your long strikes. But other than that, the list does feel pretty good whenever I played it. It's really deceptive, I found, when I was playing it. Like, you tell people you have questers, and like you tell them like, yeah, I could teleport like 5 units in 1 turn if I want to. You never probably will, but like your opponent's like, okay, his entire army essentially can teleport at will. Like, where do I put my models? Because at any point, in my turn, I could just be like, well, I'm gonna go take that. Don't go take your backfield objective that you ended up leaving open, right? So like, against a higher skill player, it really puts them on edge, because now they're trying to go forward to score their tactics and their objectives, while at the same time having to protect their own stuff, because you could just teleport at any given moment. I think the reason the dragons and questers here work a lot is because as James mentioned, the whole between efficient, like, do you bring efficient stuff? How much efficient stuff do you bring? But you also need to bring impactful units. And that's kind of where the dragons and questers complement each other. They don't complement each other in the scouting force aspect, but it's like I'm spending all these points on dragons who in themselves are not efficient, but they're so high impact. They do so much damage, which means the rest of my list has to be more efficient and not as impactful, just really lean and efficient, which questers at 200 points like fit that bill. They're the ones who go get those objectives, go just slow roll your scouting force points and restless points, and your dragons are the ones that are doing all the damage. In a lot of my games, that's kind of what it was. It was a lot of like I had these like big dragons on the field, and they would hit things, and then I would recycle them with the relictor, and I had the raptors just firing away, and like your opponent's trying to take care of these dragons because they just are like they're hitting me and then they're recycling, like I have to have an answer for this. But then like the clusters at the entire time during your game, they're just like sneaking across the board. And then it's like turn 3 and you're just racking up your scouting points at that point.
Yeah, and at any point, once the opponent commits to an engagement, they have to commit significant resources to take out one quester unit, because if they don't, you just teleport away and reset the engagement.
Yeah. And that's what my opponents were finding too, was like if I go into the questers, I have to kill the questers. Because I've had opponents leave 1 or 2 questers alive, and then in my turn I have teleported away, and guess what? Those 1 or 2 questers have scored me scouting force points. Because they'll just sit by the terrain piece.
And they can rally. Unlike most of our units, on average, you'll revive a quester, unless you roll rally like me, and you don't. But that's, maybe you guys roll better.
You know what would be cool? A named Night Quester that would give the Tornus boost for Quester rallies.
What if the Night Quester just did that? He does nothing. Just add an ability to him, please. He's so bad.
Please, just like give him something. I don't know. Even in the animation, he just had to ask everybody else for help. He didn't actually do anything. So maybe he's lore accurate actually. But yeah, I think this list is really well. I've seen other people in our Discord, especially playing it, finding the same results with Lightning Echelon. I've been seeing the quester spam. I'm not sure how often you guys check BCP and stuff for 4-1s and lists and above, but like ever since Worlds, like a lot of people are like realizing the efficiency of questers, and they're taking 2 or 3 units. There's just shoving them in a list with a hammer.
Yeah, Quester and Annihilators are high on the inclusion right now.
Yeah. Some people are saying Quester Soulsworn feel like an S tier unit. I'm not there yet. I feel like they're an A+ unit. They plug a hole that is like common to almost every Stormcast list, but I don't think they're a necessity to play. Not like a Night Relictor. I think every list has a Night Relictor.
Yeah. I still like. I mean, you still like. They kind of feel like they're like. I think people look at questers and they look at Pyregeist, and while they're kind of doing the same thing, where it's just efficiency spam, like questers don't have a gun, they don't have ethereal. Like you still have to like. They have to make sense in your list, and that's why like you're seeing scouting force become a lot more prevalent in Stormcast, is because questers are good at scoring that.
Yeah, but 5-inch move. If you bring too much 5-inch move, your list is bad. Slow melee armies are not viable in this game.
You can go talk to your Nurgle friends.
Well, that's a different story, okay?
But yeah, no, this list is good. I think it's tried and true. I think you'll see this type of list a lot more mirroring as time goes on. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next balance patch. Probably questers are going to be so used that they're going to get that +10 hit again. Even though they went down, they're probably going to go back up. But for now, at least. It's a pretty good. I like this list. It's good. It's been well.
I have to wonder. I didn't watch all of his games, but I have to wonder if he had Lightning Echelon, would he have taken the whole thing? You know, was it because he failed that 3-up Rampage in a clutch moment?
I'd also like. I think the issue is sometimes I see a lot of like strike. Like I don't know. I guess in my meta at least, sometimes I've been seeing newer books and stuff having access to strike last, either for you or strike first for your opponent. And it's like it's nice to know that, well, in a desperate situation, if I needed to, I could risk the 3+ so I could still strike before my opponent.
Yeah, I mean, in a desperate situation. Yeah, you don't rely on it, but in a Hail Mary style play, it's nice that it's a 3+ and not like a 4 or 5. All right, that'll do it for our discussion on Stormdrake Guard. Hopefully you guys found this video interesting. Hopefully you want to try using Stormdrake Guard because they're an awesome unit. You have to be very careful with them, but they will reward a patient and careful general. They have a lot of advantages and a lot of disadvantages as well.
Bring back out those dragons, even though they're not the point value that we want them at. They are fun to use. I am happy that I was convinced to use dragons.
Well, thank everybody for watching. Hopefully this was interesting and or entertaining or informative. Thanks to everyone, especially our Patreon supporters. You guys make it worth making these long-form videos, and I hope this one was worth the wait. If you think we missed anything with Stormdrake Guard or our analysis is lacking in some way, leave a comment down below. Or if you just think we're totally wrong and we suck, feel free to tell us that. Either way, it feeds the algorithm, suckers. If you want to talk about AOS, feel free to join the Stormkeep Discord server. I think personally, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's the best place to talk about AOS. We have a battle reports forum where we put like detailed thoughts about our battles, going into thought process, strategic analysis. We don't just talk about, oh, I did this, then this, then this. We talk about why we do those things, and hopefully that will help you guys learn and get better. We have a lot of great painters, hobbyists. People do crazy conversions all the time. We host community contests. Right now, I think we have a painting Quester Soulsworn contest going on. I don't think there's any prizes this month, but if you just have Quester Soulsworn, you want to post them and show them off, jump into the server. And we do list building, a lot of list building. That's a lot of what we do, but we do it for every army too. It's not just for Stormcast. So if you play like Lumineth or Slaves to Darkness or Ogres or anything in between, then feel free to jump in. You can also consider supporting the gang by becoming a member on YouTube or joining us on patreon.com/thestormkeep. For $5 a month, you can get early access to our videos and access to all the slides that you see in these videos. I gotta figure out like a catchphrase for wrapping these videos up. Oh, I know. David, say echelon again. Say, how do you pronounce Storm Coven?
Coven? like a witch's coven? Yeah.
Witch's coven. Oh, man. Oh, boy. All right, that's it, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.
I see y'all. Bye.